Today we are joined by ReShonda Young, and ReShonda has a lot of stuff going on when it comes to small business and entrepreneurship. As a matter of fact, she is part of the Black Business Entrepreneurship and Accelerator Program. She works with the Small Business Development Center from UNI. She's also part of the Iowa Community Capital, and she is currently in the process of working on opening the Bank of Jabez. And so lots of stuff going on, ReShonda. Thank you so much for joining us today. I always love talking to you because I feel like you are such an inspiring individual for business owners, so incredibly knowledgeable, and just a ray of sunshine in everything you do.
Oh, thanks, Heather.
So through this long journey that you've had, and I guess maybe let's start with that, how did you get involved in all of these organizations that are really working to help support small businesses?
I got involved with organizations right in the middle of COVID. And that came about like with the Black Business Entrepreneurship and Accelerator Program and the Small Business Development Center. That came about after the report that showed that Waterloo and Cedar Falls were like the #1 worst place in America for Black Americans to live. And also with COVID, Black business owners not receiving PPP funding at the rate that other business owners were. And so there were different organizations that were coming together to see like how can we help make sure that that's not the case in terms of our business owners not getting funding. And also it was noted like around the United States, about 40% of Black businesses are closing their doors, more than likely for good. And so we were just trying to, put a plug in all of that. And so different members of these organizations were meeting, and then they came and asked if I would be willing to direct and facilitate an accelerator that helped to support Black business owners within the Waterloo Cedar Falls community. So that's how I got involved with them. And then the Small Business Development Center through UNI, because UNI was part of the whole process of getting this together. And so just to be able to support additional business owners, because being a small business owner is just tough. And so, there are challenges that Black business owners, I do see that we face that maybe other communities don't face as much or as severely, but all small business owners mostly have some challenges and need some assistance. And so I contract with them and with Iowa Community Capital to be able to help with that. And so they had approached me just because I've been a small business owner in the area for the past 20 years. So I've got a little experience.
Yeah. So speaking of experience, you are now experiencing something really new, and that is the process of opening a bank. So tell me a little bit about what that process has been like.
It has been quite a journey. I always say I've never been in banking. I love numbers. I love finance. I've been securities licensed. I've done all those things, but I've never been in banking. And it was not like I was just sitting around thinking, oh, I think I want to open a bank. Like that was not the deal. I've had a lot of challenges when it has come to working with banks. There have been a lot of things, even on like a federal and national level, that have really needed to be addressed. And so I've been a part of kind of some larger initiatives to address some of those things. But yeah, it's just been an interesting journey, and a lot of people though are coming around to support, and they see the need for what it is that I'm trying to do.
So this is a pretty huge undertaking with a lot of complicated moving parts. And a lot of people would have just thrown in the towel or said, no, this is way too big for me to even think about doing. What was it that inspired you to take on this journey? Why open a bank?
Yeah, so, one of the things that I found from just starting my own businesses and then also, working with other established businesses is that it's oftentimes easier to create a culture and environment that you want and that there's a need for than it is to change a culture or an environment that has been what it is for decades or even potentially a whole century. And so I was part of a group that addressed it was the 1071 section of the Dodd-Frank Act, where banks are supposed to be collecting information to make sure that they're not discriminating against business owners and minority business owners in particular, but small business owners and women. And even though it's on the books, there are ways around it. And, if it's not being enforced, which it was not being enforced, um, banks just don't do it, And so there's always a way around different things if you don't want to comply. And so instead of, for me, trying to make people do something that they don't want to do, I just feel like even though it's a huge undertaking, it's much easier to create. And then I believe it's also more sustainable because once you create a culture and an environment, it's not something that's going to be pushed against because people are coming into something new. You're not changing. It's kind of like the old book, Who Moved My Cheese? Well, nobody moved your cheese. Like, I'm making a whole different flavor of cheese here. So um that's pretty much the deal. Like, there are things that need to be addressed, and I'm not wanting to shy away from addressing them, and I want to bring people along who are on board with that, and just to see equity, to see everybody have a fair shot at truly becoming successful with the business, home ownership, and just being able to live out what we think of as the American dream.
I love that. I so agree with this culture point that you're making. I just did a webinar on building a high performance culture. And you're right, it is so much easier to start on the right foot from the ground up than to take over and recreate a culture or change a culture, because there are so many long-term entrenched behaviors that you also have to work on changing. It gets really complicated, and people get really married to their history of how they've always done it and what's always worked and that kind of thing. So I totally agree. And when you build your culture, you can attract the people who resonate with those same values and that same desire to serve that mission. And so I love that you focus on culture. Now, part of our conversations have been also this need for an access to capital. So if you're a small business owner and you are struggling to get access to capital, what are some things that you can do to overcome that challenge?
So one of the big things for small business owners is that a lot of times you're working with one person or maybe just 2 or 3 people within the organization. And so they're working on such a small level that they don't see the big picture of needing an accountant. They may not be able to afford one. And they don't necessarily understand profit and loss statements and balance sheets and all the financial things that you need to have in order to go to a bank and to be able to show them the sustainability of your idea, that you've got a plan to be able to repay them. And so the Small Business Development Center, I think, is a really great tool for many small business owners to be able to go and get that kind of assistance, where if that's not something that you're accustomed to doing, you can get some assistance with somebody just being able to walk alongside you and help you with that. And then just little things like QuickBooks and showing somebody how to use QuickBooks, because you may not need to have an accountant at that point. you can, if you can learn how to use QuickBooks and input your data properly, then you can print those reports out and be able to, provide those types of things. But then also another important thing is understanding that banks are not the only place that you can go to for funding. And so that's one of the reasons that I've connected with Iowa Community Capital. They do micro lending. And so, being able to have an alternative where somebody maybe was denied by a traditional bank, but, an institution like Iowa Community Capital and their microloan program, could be an option that people don't know about. So just being able to explain other options and offer other things to people.
So when you're thinking about the access to capital, besides knowing where to go, what are some of the pitfalls that small business owners fall into, maybe with the wrong sources or things that they don't have ready to take with them to have these conversations?
Yeah, so, and that's another reason why I really encourage people, if they don't know, like, just ask for help, because it's not like it's something that we're just born knowing. Like, we know our trade. We know how to, if we are a baker, we know how to bake. If we make clothing, we know how to make clothing. We don't necessarily walk into a business thinking, oh, great, I get to learn how to do financial statements. And, I automatically know that, I can write off my mileage or part of my home or all these different things. And so working with the Small Business Development Center, you can work with somebody who is able to give you some ideas and, a list and a resource guide for things that, you should know or have access and accessible and available when you do go to a bank. And even just the business plan. Being able to walk through how to write a business plan and having a template where people can plug things in and bounce ideas off of, somebody who's been through it. So, I really encourage people not to try and go it alone. I did that for many years because I didn't know of resources or have a mentor. And you bump your head and you lose a lot of money sometimes because you don't know how to do things the right way. And so I'm a big advocate for reaching out to get the help. So like I say, Small Business Development Center, no cost to people. And then, if you can forge a relationship with a mentor, that's always amazing as well.
So when you think about all of getting access to capital, I know that I've come into contact with several small business owners who have made some pretty bad decisions on who to partner with and have really gotten maybe taken advantage of or not the best, put in the best situation that really is serving them. So as you think about getting access to capital, what are a couple of things that a small business owner should be really mindful of? Maybe it's questions or background. What kinds of things should they take into consideration as they work to advocate for themselves to get access to funding?
One of the things that I didn't understand early on is that your banker has a little leeway, when it comes to the terms of repayment for the loans. And so just, like I say, working with somebody so that you know some of the questions to ask. Sometimes in the beginning, if you don't have a ton of working capital that's set aside, you're going to maybe need, a few months where you're only paying interest, or you may need, for them to delay you starting your payments for a couple of months until you're able to start getting some revenue generated. Because if you walk into a situation where you don't have a lot of working capital, and that's something else I encourage people to ask for, is, some working capital assistance, or, understanding how much you're going to need to have just in case. I mean, just in case something like COVID comes up, you
Right.
need to have a reserve. And a lot of times business owners will start a financial relationship with a bank or other lender, and they're so happy to get a little bit of money even though they know it's not what they need, that they'll accept that little bit and they walk into a really bad situation because that little bit isn't enough. And now you've got potentially rent if you have a brick and mortar, you've got a loan repayment that you didn't know potentially how to negotiate or ask for terms that are more favorable to you. There's just a lot of things that you can walk into that, just put you in a really bad situation. But I mean, I see it over and over where, somebody will really need 75,000 to really get going. And a bank is like, oh, well, you've got, maybe 10, we'll do another 50 for you. Well, realistically, then you are starting $15,000 behind. That is not a good situation. And so, just talking people through some of those types of things, not jumping the gun, not feeling these, moments of desperation, or, one thing I've also found is that I can go to one lender and this is, they may say no to this, but a different lender may have a completely different requirement or different terms. And so, I've gone and I've experienced that personally, where I've gone to a lender and the terms that they wanted me to abide by, I'm like, oh, that really doesn't fit. And I've gone to a completely different lender and it's been like night and day. Everything that I needed, I'm like, okay, this is exactly what I needed. So, not getting stuck with, okay, well, I tried this one and it didn't work, so now, I'm going to put my head in the sand. It's like, no, just keep trying. So.
Awesome. So as a small business owner, you've been in the Cedar Valley for a long time. You've been involved in your own small businesses. What's the best advice that you received about being a business owner that really saved you maybe some time, some pain, money?
So mentorship, having a mentor, somebody who's been there and done that. And then also paying yourself. So many small business owners get stuck into this rut of not actually paying themselves. And it's like, you are the most valuable person in your business, and you would not go and work for somebody else for nothing. And I'm not saying that, you aren't going to be spending more time, and energy into your business than somebody else's. But at the end of the day, if you can't figure out how to pay yourself, at some point you're going to have to close because you've got to eat, you've got to pay rent, you've got to do all of these things. So being able to figure out, how is this business going to support me to be able to live? And then also, just like I said, having a mentor who's been there, done that, and can, just give guidance on things like, oh, this is a pitfall that I ran into, or, oh, did you know about this or think about that? And, once I did get a mentor, it was like game changing for me.
So besides that, what advice would you give to small business owners, having experienced opening a business, franchising a business, now in this phase of opening a bank? What's some advice that you would give that maybe you learned along the way?
So a lot of times business owners will only do a business plan for a bank. Like, they'll do it basically trying to put together what they think the bank wants to see. And one of the things that I learned is, yeah, I can write a business plan exactly what the bank wants to see, all these things. But at the end of the day, that business plan is really for me. And that business plan needs to be my guide. And so even for business owners who may not be going to a bank for funding, they may be self-funding, just having thought through your marketing and, researched your competitors and understand who your customer is, who you're targeting, how much you need to be setting aside for advertising and promotions, and putting together that 1, 3, and 5 year plan of, cash flow, that stuff for me, I learned it can't be for the bank. That is for you to be able to really efficiently and effectively run your business. And it's a very flexible and fluid document that changes over time. So don't just write it and sit it down and never come back to it. It really is a guide and a tool that you need to use for yourself.
I love that advice because I'm a big fan of even chunking it down into 90-day sprints in your business in order to make sure that you hit the mark and you don't get 3 quarters into the year and go, wow, we're so far off where we thought. And I think the other benefit to it, and I was just talking about this with a business owner yesterday, we were talking about Growth Club, which is a 90-day business planning workshop that I do. And I think the other benefit to this business plan piece is when you get in the trenches of your business and you are operating it day in and day out, your bandwidth starts to get really consumed by the fires you're putting out and the current needs right now that are urgent of the business. And when you lay it out of what am I going to do over the next 90 days, year, 3 years, 5 years, it takes some of that thinking out of it because you've spent the time working on the business, and it frees you up to work in the business and go back and say, okay, this is week 3 of the quarter. This is what I should be doing in order to stay on track. And it also gives you the opportunity to look at, okay, I'm 3 weeks from the end of the quarter and I'm not at my goals. What do I need to do? How do I need to pivot to make sure I do hit those goals? So I so agree with you. The planning is so incredibly important because as business owners, we already have so much on our minds, so much that we're juggling, that when that plan is mapped out, it's like going on vacation where you set your GPS and you don't have to think about finding your way there. You just have to follow the map that you laid out. So
yes,
love that. So before I let you go, anything else that you feel it's really important to be said or that we didn't talk about that you want to make sure you share?
It really kind of goes along with the idea of the business plan and what you just said. Like when I was running my own store, every week, there was like a 2-hour time that I scheduled off on my calendar where I could just focus on like, not being in the business, but working on my business. And so oftentimes, like you said, we get in the trenches. There's so many things. Our bandwidth is just like all taken up. But like scheduling that time every single week where you can focus on your business instead of all of the things that you have to do in your business. Like that is so critical.
Amen. Yeah. So tell me, if a business owner watching this video wants to learn more about access to capital or figure out where to go for some of these free resources, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you or these resources?
The place I send most people to is to the Small Business Development Center website. And so that's www.s as in Sam, B as in boy, dciowa.org. So sbdciowa.org. And if you need some assistance, there's a tab to click on or a button to click on that says request counseling. And it routes you to the office that's closest to you. So if you're in Waterloo, Cedar Falls, it'll route you to the University of Northern Iowa office, and you would be connected either with myself or Amy Dutton, who's the regional director of the Small Business Development Center.
Well, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. I always find it fascinating to have conversations with you. I learn so much, and I'm always inspired by watching how many business owners have come through these programs and are opening up locations in our community and adding so much value to the community. Every single small business is so critical for the economy of our local community. And so having a robust system that helps support those small business owners is always awesome and such an important thing. So thank you so much for being with me today.
Oh, thank you for inviting me, Heather.